What's up, family, and welcome back to another episode of the Melanin Wellness Podcast. Now, for this Movember episode, we're going to be talking about something that so many men feel, but they rarely discuss, and that is the pressure of being the provider of a family. So carrying financial, emotional, and family responsibilities can be positively exhausting. And oftentimes, men don't talk about the stress that it creates for them. So today we're going to unpack that a little. We're going to talk about the costs, the signs, and what men can do to protect their health while still fulfilling their roles at that high level. But before I get into this episode, I want to take a moment to ground ourselves in gratitude. So today I am grateful for my strong Black man who provides for me and our family. Not just monetarily, but in his emotional currency. I know that can be a heavy pull for him sometimes. In the way that he loves and shows up for our family in moments where there is much uncertainty. And in the safety and vulnerability that he demonstrates daily, not just to me, but also to our children, which is teaching them that being strong but vulnerable at times is absolutely sexy, that being human is okay, and that being a provider is not just about dollar signs. So, thanks, babe. Now, being the provider is not just about money, which the dynamic in our culture has often taught our men that that's what being a provider means, is simply to provide financially, and that's it. But being a provider is about so much more than that. It's also about emotional labor, decision making, and holding everything all together. Research shows that men who constantly shoulder these responsibilities experience higher levels of stress, sleep disturbances, and increased risk for things like anxiety, depression, and even cardiovascular problems. And too often men feel like they have to kind of tough it out, so to speak, which only compounds the impact that it has to their health, both mentally and physically. So let's touch a little bit more on emotional labor. The invisible work that our men are often doing on the back end, which is sometimes the planning of things for the family's future, the worrying about things that may not be going according to plan, and how he's going to make sure that everyone gets taken care of and that they get what they need, as well as the emotional support that they offer, which oftentimes does not have a spotlight. Oftentimes we take that for granted. We just feel like that's what he's supposed to do. But the stress behind that sometimes is, especially if he does not have that experience in his own life, if he has not had that lived experience and hasn't seen that model for him attempting to do that without having that model is tough, can be very, very tough. And he's often used as the family's thermostat. He's constantly adjusting to keep the emotional climate in the house stable, because y'all know, listen, us as women, and especially us mama bears, listen, we can get real high temperatured real quick. And so having that emotional thermostat there sometimes, kind of cooling the temperature when it gets too hot, or raising that temperature when it needs to be raised, that's a heavy, heavy pressure to be on the shoulders. And while, it's often discussed in context of women, emotional labor, it's a huge factor for men as well. And research shows that men often have fewer close friends to turn to for emotional support and leaning heavily on their partners. I can attest to that. My husband does have a strong support system of friends, and I'm so grateful that he has that. I'm so, so grateful, and he is so blessed to have that they are all emotionally evolved men. And so when they need to have these discussions, there is no shame, there's no uncomfortableness, there's no stigma. And as a matter of fact, you guys should have seen it on the men's roundtable where my husband and two of his very close friends were on, and they were very candid and vulnerable about that. And if you haven't checked it out, go check that episode out. It is phenomenal. And so having that does lessen the amount that they rely on with their partners. But as their partners, we have to be their safe spaces. I know that my husband comes to me and talks to me about things that he doesn't talk to anybody else about. And he will always have a safe space. And he never has to worry about those things coming back up in arguments and them being thrown back in his face. And that is very important, because this level of weight, he's got to have somewhere to lay his burdens down safely. And now, not having that support system, though, can be a major source of stress for men. And it can lead to things like feeling a sense of inadequacy, isolation, or even worthlessness if they can't fix everything. And it can turn into this vicious cycle, because men can be fixers. They like to make everything all better. Like they don't like to see us cry. They just want to know what they can do to make it stop. But it can turn into a vicious cycle. So keep that in mind. And also the decision-making burden. Now, for those who have experienced being single parents before, you know what that feels like. The decision-making burden is a constant stress, whether the decision is big or small. Everything from financial security to home repairs to just figuring out what's for dinner sometimes. If your wife or your partner is too exhausted to cook, she's traveling for work, or whatever the case may be, those things, believe it or not, can create a high level of stress. And it is the pressure to always make the right call all the time, because that's the call that's on men. That's the pressure that's on them. And the weight of what happens if you don't make the right decision. And this isn't a one-time thing. It is a constant mental tax. And I can liken this to my son, who is, as a matter of fact, we can double this back. We have two sons who are on the brink of major athletic careers. One who is going to play D1 football, and one who is on the cusp of being ready to turn into a pro boxer. And my husband has been instrumental in both of their lives, both of their careers to this point. In fact, he is still one of the boxing coaches for my son, who is currently an amateur boxer. And the decisions that is weighted on him to ensure their future goes according to plan is huge. I watch him stress over making the right decisions all the time. We talk about it all the time about, is he making the right call? Is this the right decision? What does he do if this happens, or if that curveball comes from out of nowhere? How does he navigate this? And it's one of those things that it does keep him up at night, times when I'm asleep or half asleep, because I can feel when he's not asleep, and I can feel when he's kind of tossing and turning with his thoughts. And it causes him to get less sleep. So he's more groggy and more irritable the next day. And then he still has to continue to go on with our very rigorous schedule that we have with these kids. And it is often at a sacrifice to our relationship sometimes, because we don't get as much time together as we need or as we would like, because of the sacrifices and the decisions that he has made. Now, fortunately, he has a partner who understands. I understand what's at stake. I understand that our children's future is at stake. And so we just make it work. It just works. However, it is extremely difficult. And I definitely can see the weight and the pressure that this adds to him when he's got to make these right decisions. And, he's still got to get up and go to work every day to provide, with all these things on his head, with all these stressors, with me calling him on the phone, and I'm all upset about something that's happening. And he's still got to stay calm so he can deal with what he deals with at work, which, again, y'all, we already know what that world is like out there. So we've got to stay calm. He's got to stay relaxed. So, and then he's got to try to keep me calm, because then I'm all upset. And so it is a constant mental tax. And then there's the financial pressure. And we all know how heavy of a weight financial pressures weigh on men. And so a report by a source called Equimundo, the Center for Masculinities and Social Justice, found that the pressure to be a provider and maintain financial stability is taking a heavy toll on men. As one study revealed, men with more financial responsibility in a marriage can experience a decline in their psychological well-being and in their overall health. And another study found that when wives started earning more than their husbands, the probability of the mental health diagnosis increased by 11% for the men. Yikes. That's a serious number. But at the end of the day, for me, my view on marriage is that it is a partnership. So to me, it doesn't matter who makes more money. It never has. There have been times where I was the breadwinner in my relationship, times where my husband was the breadwinner. At the end of the day, we are a partnership. We are a team. So it does not matter because everything that goes in there is ours. So I think that that has helped to alleviate some of that financial pressure off of my husband that he has felt before in the past, like when he was the breadwinner. Now, finally, let's talk about this tough it out mentality. This is one that is extremely important to hone in on, right? Those things cause a rise in the suicide rates. Some research suggests that men are 16.3 times more likely to contemplate suicide. And a separate study also found that 4 out of 5 suicides are committed by men. And it's the leading cause of death for men aged 35 and younger. That's not just a number. That is a whole ass crisis right there. So let's tap into a few signs that you may be carrying a little too much. And then we'll talk about what you can do about it. Common signs of carrying too much is chronic fatigue and burnout. I've seen this in my husband repeatedly. Over the years, there have been certain things that have manifested because that chronic fatigue, because he's exhausted, because he can't sleep from the stressors, and then he's burning out because he's continuously go. Irritability and mood swings. I just talked about that. When you're tired and you're stressed, you're not going to be the nicest person. That is just what that is. Trouble sleeping or staying focused. Again, when you are stressed and your anxiety is through the roof, trying to relax your mind to rest is next to impossible if you are worried about, okay, one of the cars is breaking down. What am I going to do? My family needs more money. I can't ask for a raise, but what I'm making ain't enough. That level of stress definitely disrupts the sleep. And when the sleep is disrupted, all the other things follow. And not to mention the fact that these things also cause some of the chronic issues such as high blood pressure, heart disease, overeating, weight gain, imbalances in hormones. All of those things are caused by these high levels of stress. So it's a trickle-down effect. And also they avoid checkups or self-care because they feel like they don't have time for that. I don't have time to take off from work for that because then I'm missing pay. There's the money stressor. But then you're not taking care of yourself. So you don't know those base levels. You don't know where your body is. You don't know what you need to address. Recognizing these signs is the first step towards reclaiming some balance and protecting both your physical and your mental health. Because we need you here. We need you here. All that grinding, there's no sense in it if you can't be here to be with us. Now let's get into the practical strategies. Because again, y'all know that I don't give you a problem without a solution. All right, so here's how to lighten up that load a little bit without failing your responsibilities, fellas. Number 1, let's talk about delegation and communication. So involve your partner. I promise you we can handle that. Your family members, if you've got family, if you've got a village, involve them. Or trusted friends. So if you are just exhausted and like, hey, I can't make it to this practice or to this game, can I tag someone else in? That's what your village is supposed to be for. I need rest. Instead of trying to meet all the obligations. My husband and I, we do this on a regular basis. Now, unfortunately, it's just the two of us in our tag team. However, we figure it out. We definitely figure it out, but definitely delegating and communicating. I'm not okay. I can't do this today, and get someone else to come in and lighten that load. Number 2, set some boundaries. Work-life boundary is not optional. That balance is an absolute must. Please, 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 if you can avoid it, do not bring your work home. Allow work to be work. Allow life and home to be life and home. There has to be a separation between the two. We have to try not to allow the two to bleed into one another, because that compounds our stress. Number 3, prioritize your self-care. Sleep, nutrition, and movement are not luxuries. They are requirements and musts, especially as we start to go into our 40s and beyond. Because as I pointed out before, by that time we have a full load of responsibilities. We've got families, we've got kids going into college, some of us have grandkids. We are entering a different phase of our marriages. And so we have to be prioritizing those things. Our metabolisms are slowing down. Weight gain is more likely. Those things that may be hereditary in our families may be trying to creep up on us. So getting that required 7 to 9 hours of sleep, getting that good nutrition, 80 to 90% of our diet being a whole healthy diet, with that 10 to 20% being for your treats, and that 150 minutes of exercise per week, which breaks down to roughly 30 minutes per day, 5 days a week. That's not a luxury. That has to be a non-negotiable for your life. I have harped on this all month long. So I know y'all sick of hearing it by now, but that is how important it is. And finally, number 4, mental health support. Therapy, if you're good with that. Mentorship or peer groups. Find someone that you trust, that you feel safe with, that you feel comfortable with, that you feel like can relate to what you are talking about, so that you can get it off your brain, get it off your mind, get it off your heart. Holding on to it adds to the pressure. It compounds the stress level. Because strength isn't just enduring pressure, it's managing it wisely. Because we're going to all have pressure. No matter where we are in our lives, we all have a pressure. It just looks different. But it is about how you manage that pressure. All right, family. That's it for this episode. Share this episode with the men in your life. Subscribe for more wellness insights if you love the show. And remember, carrying it all doesn't have to cost you your health, and it shouldn't. Protect yourself, set your boundaries, and be the strong, balanced man that your family needs. All right? Until the next episode, family. Take care.